Business Scene.
Hello, Green Country. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Business Scene here at the Tulsa Scene podcast. I'm Brittany. I am the owner and a journalist at Verified News Network, also referred to as VNN. We are an independent nationwide news network based here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Kelly, with more than a decade of corporate managerial experience, is my co-host. He is now a private consultant for tech startups. And we're so excited today to have our next guest joining us here on this podcast. She is Penny Horton, owner of Who's Your HR. And are you here in Tulsa, Penny?
I am.
Awesome. Why don't you basically kind of give us a rundown of who you are and what your company essentially does?
Sure. So I am an HR consultant. I have spent most of my HR career embedded inside of organizations of various different sizes across multiple different industries. But about 3 years ago, launched my own HR consulting firm called Who's Your HR. And our focus is around really helping businesses navigate all of the legal complexities that go along with being an employer. And so I have loved the opportunity of taking my corporate experience and being able to transfer that over to organizations of different sizes and help them with all of their HR needs.
Wonderful. And so when you say like HR needs and services, for me and like my past experiences working with big companies who have HR departments, to me that is like payroll and maybe if there's like a disagreement, but that's pretty much my knowledge of what HR really does. So what kind of things do you offer to companies?
Yeah, I think, Brittany, that your experience is not unlike a lot of employees within an organization. I think typically they're of the mindset that, I probably should stay out of HR as much as possible, except for getting something like, a paycheck or the benefits administration stuff. But really, I would obviously encourage people that it's the opposite way, right? The human resources department is really the hub of activity as it centers around people in an organization. And so we help facilitate everything from pre-hire, so that's as you're the job candidate thinking about joining the organization, all the way through your career within an organization. So you can think about, obviously, the getting paid and getting access to your benefits. Obviously, if there are issues along the way, we can help, but also training and development, broadening your skill set. So helping you advance and be mobile within the company as well, all the way to the retirement stage, excuse me, all the way to the retirement stage of the organization where you're, kind of wrapping up your career and, moving on. HR is integral in every element along that journey, for sure.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. So I'm wondering, like, as far as like I mentioned, when I hear HR, I think of like big companies but obviously there's companies of all shapes, sizes, not just corporations. So at like what point should a company, size-wise or like how long they've been in business, when should they start considering tapping into some of those needs? Like, is it, 5 employees, 10 employees, making a certain amount of revenue a year? Like when do you say that people should kind of jump into contacting you?
Yeah, well, I think there's a real niche, or at least what I found is that there is that missing piece within the HR world of what an employer really can afford versus what they need. And that's one of the main reasons that I started the organization, because I don't think that true expertise coming from the HR profession should only be privileged to those companies that are larger in size, right? So there's a lot of small businesses that need help around human resources, right? Getting talent in their doors, keeping them engaged, retaining that talent, growing that talent. So those organizations can, if that's in their dream, to one day be a big, huge corporation, right? But oftentimes when you're starting out, you can't afford a full-time HR person or have access to that. So my firm in particular really focuses on that market space. And really, I always tell people that even as you're getting ready to hire your first employee, there are so many things that you don't know as a business owner, because you're focused on whatever the product or the service is or whatever drew you into that business, where your passion and your drive lies, right? But there's all this other stuff that has to happen from a compliance standpoint or from a people standpoint, and it takes up an exorbitant amount of time for you and pulls you away from what you really need to be focusing on, right? So if you can engage with a firm like mine, where we can come in and offer customized solutions, really designed with upfront pricing around what our services look like, so you can budget accordingly, then you can have the benefit of an highly experienced HR staff without actually having to pay that payroll piece. So if you're hiring your first employee, or even if you're using contractors today and want to look at switching over to having employee, then our firm can help. And then there's the flip side too. I mean, the other half of our customers really are ones that have an existing HR team, and we're providing either additional help or helping them drive special projects to completion, or providing a level of subject matter expertise that maybe their internal HR staff doesn't have. So we're a solution we can work for everyone, no matter what size the organization is.
Cool. That definitely sounds like not necessarily like a one size fits all, but like you do it all.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, everything from payroll processing to obviously, candidate selection and interviewing and hiring, plus all of those other things I mentioned earlier, the training and development, all the way through the end of the employee's life cycle with the organization. That all fits neatly into our bucket for sure.
Yeah, it's a large gamut of services, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's what HR is, right? I mean, it's because it is broad. You're touching kind of the employees across every, facet of the organization. Then obviously you've got to have a good staff that can handle all those areas of expertise, which is what Hoosier HR has.
Very true. So, Penny, do you find yourself working with companies more here in Tulsa, or are you kind of larger scale? Like, what's your scope of reach?
Yeah, so right now we do have a lot, or I would say our largest primary base is here in the Tulsa area, but we have opportunity really to help all across the country for sure. We have clients in Oklahoma City, we have clients in Wichita, Kansas. We currently have clients in San Francisco, California. We've got clients a little bit scattered everywhere, just depending on, the needs and the reach. As we continue, obviously, to expand our staff, we'll be marketing more and more. So, pretty much, I guess the difference is there's a lot of federal employment law that's easy to navigate regardless of the state that you're in. And then each state and sometimes local laws also have unique nuances. And so just as we expand into the area, we just expand our subject matter expertise to understand what, the differences in, say, some of the employment law in Kansas or Texas, are versus what we have here in Oklahoma. So it's a pretty easy transition.
Got it. Now, obviously, with a lot of, companies, businesses, organizations, everyone going virtual, like a huge part of last year, if not the entire year, is that something that you guys were already doing, or is that kind of a pivot that you made to reach more audiences and kind of go in that direction, since it's a direction everyone was going in?
Yeah. So for us, it was really nice because we were already doing so much virtually and remotely already for our existing client base. Our work was either really done behind the scenes already, so the virtual world and remote work is already set up for that, or we were traveling to our client's office. So obviously, if we're going to go deliver a training, we would prefer to do that in person, and we did that a lot, but that was an easy pivot for us to be able to deliver. Just, meant you got to change the content some and, obviously take a slightly different approach. But so much of what we do was already set up that way that it was an easy transition. And so we actually had a really great 2020 and continued to grow our business, even though we were in the middle of a global pandemic. What I think it really helped is that business owners understood that there were ways to receive the delivery of high valued service remotely, right? If they were, not used to working in that. So it kind of opened up new doors for us in that regard, I think.
One of my last questions for you today is obviously kind of navigating that whole experience and, knowledge that now carries over from last year into this year, and your expertise with HR and that huge umbrella that all that falls into. What would you say like the best advice that you could offer to local companies as far as your pool of expertise is concerned?
So I think the best advice, I guess, that I would have is that employment law continues to be extremely complex and very tricky, right? As I particularly think about 2020, that brought on a new overwhelming amount of employment law guidance, right? As we think about the FFCRA, that Families First Coronavirus Relief Act that came into play, that created all sorts of new ways to handle leave in an organization specifically centered around the pandemic, right? And created a large amount of administrative burden around tracking of attendance and, trying to figure out how to provide employees time off that they needed, which also resulted then in special circumstances of providing pay, and then the nuance of employers trying to get that back in tax credit. So it just created all of this extra stuff, right? And that's, even though the pandemic was unusual, I think every year we're faced as HR professionals with some other type of employment law that comes out that's compliance related, that creates this administrative burden, right, for employers. And if that's not your area of expertise, it is extremely laborious to try to learn that, understand it, figure out how to execute it, right? And that takes time away from you as a business owner. Whereas if you could just engage with someone who's dedicated to learning, knowing, and navigating all of those nuances, they can do it more efficiently, which ultimately will save you money. So it becomes an investment, but as an employer, I highly encourage you to think about those, right? And at least earmark some of your money in your budget each year so that you can hopefully be prepared for those and then figure out in a way to more efficiently spend those dollars. And if you do so, then you're going to get a huge return on investment, which is not only making sure that you're in compliance, right, but also that your business is thriving and succeeding because you're focused on what you need to do to grow the business versus trying to figure out something else.
Makes sense.
A lot of good points. Well, Penny, how can folks, you covered a lot of information, how can folks best reach you and figure out more in-depth questions if they have to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we love to have consultations with any prospective clients. I personally love talking about HR related things, and there's so many things that people just don't know. So for me, it's fun to have those conversations. So they can either call us if they're obviously want to have those conversations over the phone. So our number is 539-215-8868. Or they can reach out directly via email as well, and we can always set up a call that way. So my email address is penny.horton@hrraw.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Penny, so
Thank you.
much. Great information and just a real education about what exactly HR is and everything, and how really the value that you guys offer to local businesses and apparently businesses everywhere.
That's all right. That's all right. Well, it's been my pleasure. I love, like I said, talking about it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you guys a little bit today.
Perfect. And for all you guys listening, if you are a local business or organization that would like to be featured here on the business scene, you can email me at bharlow@verifiednews.network. And if you're interested in learning more about our network, you can visit us at verifiednews.network. See, easy to remember there. Well, thanks again, Penny. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for tuning in again. I'm Brittany.
Kelly.
And we are your source for all things connected to the Tulsa business scene.
Know someone or a local business you think should be featured on the Tulsa Scene podcast? Head to www.thetulsascene.com and let us know today.